talk about saving the planet, the conversation often gets tangled in science and policies and then technology. But underneath all the jargon and regulations, there's something far more human at work. People, teams, communities, the small daily choices of individuals who come together with purpose. Welcome back, listeners, to another very interesting and impactful episode of BizBlend Podcast. I'm your host, Sana, as always. And today we are looking at environmental change not as a science, but as a story of teamwork, training, and leadership. Because the truth is, lasting impact isn't created in a lab or at a government desk alone. It's built in the field, in businesses, in the hands of people who genuinely care enough to do the hard work together. So, listeners, today we are going beyond the science to explore how training and teamwork can drive real, lasting environmental change. And of course, I would love to introduce and share my incredible guest who is here with us. So, listeners, meet my guest, Andy Ellsmore. So, Andy, welcome to the show, and it is such an honor to have you here with us.
Yeah, thank you, Sana. Thanks for having me.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Andy, I think it has been very rare when, especially on this plan that um, I have had any conversation, where businesses they are consciously working towards not only changing their internal environment but also contributing together towards you know uh, saving our environment, our mother earth. So thank you so much for doing this. And let's begin with your journey. I mean, you have spent over 20 years working on stormwater compliance and environmental solutions. So from your perspective, um, why is it often people and training rather than scientific knowledge, research, and all observations that determine whether environmental initiatives succeed?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. So I've
Mm.
spent, as you mentioned, 20 years doing environmental compliance, and I really work deeply with not only the science but the human aspect of change and changing our habits. And as you mentioned, we have this um, a lot of different tools for environmental change as well as change within our business, right? We have experiments, scientific experiments that produces data that leads to changes that we might make. But ultimately, everything that we do involves human beings. And I know that I'm not a perfect human being and I have a lot of flaws. And one of the things that we've focused a lot in our efforts is ensuring that not only internally in our team, but also our clients can create a culture not only around, let's say, the environment, but very specifically certain habits and certain ways in which we do things that can have a tremendous benefit in terms of environmental impact in a really positive way. And those are the things that are oftentimes the most difficult to achieve. We may all agree on certain data, but it's sure hard to figure out how to get
Mm.
there. But if we can all understand the importance, um, that helps. But really, it's these really small habits and frameworks in which we do our work and conduct our daily lives that ultimately have the biggest impact.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And there's no doubt in that. But then I would like to, before we proceed ahead, that, how exactly it is getting done. Um, I would like to bring in a bit of, what we are seeing. It could be that, I could be wrong with my perspective, but I think not only from education perspective, but systemic policies have been there. You know, people, activists, even corporates also have been in there pushing for environmental changes and highlighting environmental challenges. But uh, I think it kind of, looks at a bigger scale that nothing is getting done. It's like you are planting 20 trees, but at the same time dumping whole lot of all chemical waste into the oceans and then the rivers and the seas. So, uh, I mean, you know, it's kind of a view that problem isn't people or training; it's the system itself. That no amount of teamwork can solve environmental challenges without systemic shifts in policy and economics. So, how do you respond to this critique, Andy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I live in California, and California has been a leader in terms of environmental compliance regulations and initiatives for a really long time. What we see on the ground, our work specifically, just to back up a little bit, is associated with construction and industrial sites. We help them to reduce the pollutants that come off the site when we have rainfall, and that in turn helps them to comply with environmental regulations. So what we see is that we'll have an environmental regulation that may be very ambitious,
Mhm.
that has very stringent requirements, and they also have a lot of enforcement behind it as well. They'll have site visits from government officials ensuring that they're in compliance. But there's a missing link in this is even that maybe at the corporate level or even at the management level, people want to comply with these rules because of, fines or enforcement or the regulations, or that they just want to have clean water, which is great. What happens is on the ground, people get busy. Let's take, for example, an industrial worker. He's been working hard all day. And really,
Mhm.
last thing he wants to do at the end of the day is maybe clean up, cover up the materials, sweep up the yard, do these things. They're thinking about, hey, how do I get home an extra 15 minutes early? Or how can I sometimes even just do the least amount of effort because they're tired out from their day. Um,
Mhm.
these are really the places, the intersection of policy, science, and management that
Yeah.
they can't really touch that part, that individual action. So we work first with our team. We have a team of trained experts, scientists, environmental consultants that we have our own frameworks and how we learn, grow, improve our habits in terms of our diligence and focusing on what our clients needs, how to produce things appropriately. And we allow that to trickle down to our clients when we provide training. Oftentimes, we'll provide on site training, not just to the management level, but very specifically to the people who are doing the activities on site. And this may not be directly related to the compliance monitoring or reporting, but very specifically, maybe that person who's pushing the broom at the end of the day, or the person
Mhm.
who's covering up the materials, or the shift leader who's deciding whether they need to do a activity outdoors while it's raining to save a little bit of time, or to call it quits for the day, or even shift their focus to a different task that may not have as much impact on stormwater quality. All of these things are very difficult to do because they're individual decisions that people are making. And
Mhm.
part of how we communicate that to people is first, we can all agree. I I haven't met anybody who doesn't want to have clean water, that doesn't either enjoy, fresh fish, or they don't enjoy recreating in the water, or they just want clean water to drink for themselves and their family. Everybody can connect with that, but it's really hard to connect their daily habits at the end of the day or before a rainstorm with that impact that may occur. So we use a technique that involves discussing having as common understanding about what we need, and why we need it, and then talk about the stories behind things that have gone wrong. In the United States, we have a lot of examples of river pollution that was unchecked, rivers lighting on fire before the Clean Water Act was passed in the United States. Those are some extreme examples, but one of the biggest pollutants um, to waterways in the US is sediment. This can be sediment for construction sites or
Mhm.
vacant lots. It can be erosion from roadside construction or just even maybe the slope in the back of one's house. All those, when we have rain, get into the storm drain and can really impact negatively not only the stream itself, but also the aquatic life as well as the water quality, and it can bring additional pollutants. So we discuss those stories, and then we talk about a number of different ways that the individuals, very specifically, how their actions can improve that. And so that they can celebrate those things at the end of the day instead of, skipping out a little bit early on sweeping or not sweep quite as much or not covering up materials or cleaning up spills. They might
Mhm.
be able to be celebrated for making the right decision. They can celebrate personally and then also help to instill a culture for their management to celebrate them for doing the right things. And all those little teeny tiny changes make a huge difference when you're looking at the overall impact that we have. And we try to reach as many people as possible with that message is that there's small little things that one can do that can have a very significant impact over time. And it doesn't just involve regulation, it involves those very small things and culture
Mhm.
shift about thinking about how to keep the environment clean and protecting our waterways, not only for ourselves, but our loved ones.
I I completely agree with that. Completely agree with that. And really, really makes, it look possible that um teams and local teams and businesses, they can really create meaningful change. Um and talking about culture, and cultural changes, Andy, I mean, you have built teams in your own company. So how do you move training from being a one-time compliance, all these um, you know set of training documents and slides and the mailed email reminders that this is the first reminder, second reminder, you haven't done your training, you haven't done your training, just for the sake of doing training. Sometimes employees, they um, do the training, that's it. But how do you move this, how do you shift this approach from like a compliance, one time compliance box, to check into something that actually shifts culture inside organizations?
Yeah, phenomenal question. I've been involved in a number of different companies, very large companies that have attempted to make cultural change, specifically around safety and environmental practices. I've seen some of them very successful, and some of them completely fall to the wayside and be neglected completely. The things
Mhm.
that we've noticed in this process, the lasting change in the culture, it has to start at the top, where the top of the organization and middle management really champion that change, and they model that change for the employees below them. So
Mm.
that could be as simple as saying, "Hey, we're all going to take a training on environmental compliance requirements because we feel like this is important, not just because we have to check this box, but because we want to make this change." And it's a consistency game where you have to put the effort in all the time. It's not just, "Hey, we did our training this month. We'll wait until next month for our next training." It needs to be something that they're demonstrating it and they're paying attention to, because the workers below middle management and at middle management will always be looking upwards to see what the habits, the actions, and where the focus of their supervisors may be. If they say it's all about the numbers, you need to get this many pieces of product out in the next, 5 days. Well, that's
Mm.
what the focus will be. But if they say we need to get these products out, we need to get five products out in the next 5 days. Um, but we have a rainstorm and we need to make sure that we're taking care of our environmental compliance first. Then people can shift their mindset and their focus. And it does start with recognizing the challenges and the ability of the employees themselves. So this is where upper management and middle management generally have the hardest time is really connecting with the folks that are um, doing the day-to-day work. They may not
Yeah.
understand their job or the challenges that they have. So part of what we do is facilitate that conversation and that discovery as to what the ability of the worker is. So as an example, if I gave the example of cleaning up at the end of the shift. Well,
Yes.
if they never give people 15 minutes to clean up at the end of the shift, you know what will happen at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, they're going to punch out regardless. But if
Yeah.
management doesn't give them 15 minutes to sweep up and they don't give them a reminder that that's important, and maybe it involves management coming out onto the floor and pushing a broom too. Uh,
Yeah.
Part of this is recognizing that if we all have a shared value and if this is a clean or safe environment, um, the limits that we have on completing that is associated with our either ability or time and not necessarily our desire for having a clean environment. Most people would prefer to have a clean work environment, and that also benefits the stormwater and environment as well. So, recognizing that, carving out the time, giving people the appropriate equipment. We've seen where people don't have brooms, so how can you sweep up at the end of the day if you don't have the appropriate equipment to do that or the appropriate time?
Totally. Totally. I think it's not just one single individual who takes the ownership, but it's on every level, especially top down. Um, very rightly pointed out. The leaders, the middle management, um, and and um, uh, and what practical steps? I mean, if he can support that with a case study, make training stick beyond the classroom, Andy.
Yeah, great point. The most striking example that I have of making a cultural shift often comes in companies that have had fines and or legal settlements, where it gets the attention of the once again upper and middle management, where they say, "Hey, we have to make this a priority." And I've seen companies go from barely paying attention to their stormwater compliance to putting all the resources they can towards demonstrating that they're doing a good job. And it's unfortunate for them that it has to get to that point, but that's where we see the biggest change. And once again, it's the upper and middle management that become fully engaged in that process. It's not a process that's driven from the bottom down in that way. And I do have an example of where um, you know bringing from the bottom up has had pretty significant improvements as well. Is when we find a champion, is what we call it, of stormwater quality, somebody who is assigned, essentially somebody who maybe just has a little extra time on their hands. The upper management hands them the job. Well, you're in charge of stormwater compliance.
Okay.
And when that person becomes a champion of stormwater, meeting the permit requirements, ensuring that their stormwater quality is good, when they're fully engaged in that, they can influence their coworkers and they can influence their management to make the decisions and changes they need. But they also have to have that support. So there's no way to separate the individual actions from the teamwork and the focus and culture of the whole company in terms of improving environmental compliance and improving the environment and water quality.
Wow. Definitely, definitely. I think it's a ripple effect. It's definitely a ripple effect. And I really like that because when it comes to training, too often it feels like a lecture and not a lived experience. And I think our listeners, they'll definitely know how much impactful lived experiences can be. Also, around leadership. I mean, in your experience, Andy, um, what role does teamwork play in keeping environmental initiatives alive when, regulations they feel complicated or overwhelming?
Yeah, great question. So teamwork's essential in this process because you have to have subject matter experts. So for example, our company plays that role, but also not just persons or individuals that are responsible for ensuring compliance with the rules, but also being able to communicate those rules effectively, and make them adaptable to each person's job. For instance, maybe the administrative assistant at a business may have a very small impact on water quality. She would be throwing papers away or, things like this just to make sure they're in the waste container. That's important. But one of the, actually, another striking example of change was we had an administrative assistant who took the responsibility of being their stormwater champion, and
Mhm.
they went from being out of compliance and continuing having metals, contaminants in the water that was running off from their site. But she was able to turn the culture around completely. So it doesn't have to be a specific individual or specific role, but the teamwork has to originate from somewhere, and you have to have those experts, right? You have to have an expert that helps advising. You have to have the expert in being responsible for the compliance, an expert responsible for getting the team together, rallying around that goal. So the teamwork is essential for that process, and you can't have any types of gaps in that teamwork. You have to have all those components.
Totally, totally. And I think this also calls for, um, kind of making realize the value behind this, because somebody who is volunteering for this, let's say from a team, if they do not feel, um, I mean, that's what reality, is. Because sometimes we may feel that, this is once again some another compliance. So why should I care? Why should all of us care? I mean, we have so much of workload. So let's not devote time to this. But if we are getting rewarded for that, at least recognized for that, then only I think that ripple effect comes into fruition.
Absolutely. The management has to recognize the extra effort somebody's taking in that process. And it could be as simple as throwing away the trash, covering trash cans, moving some materials out of the rain. Those have to be recognized, and that process of recognition needs to be celebrated. And even if people individually aren't getting the recognition that they deserve, and this goes for anybody really, um, when we recognize that we do something positive, either for the environment or for our community, for our coworkers, we should celebrate that we're doing something good. And that will make us, even in a small way, feel a little bit better about our day, that we've helped make others people's lives and or the environment better. And all of those things really make a big difference when you're talking about the process of improving the environment, whether you say it's from a government regulation standpoint, people who've passed laws or advocated for laws, or different industry groups that advocate for their position. It's a process of everybody um, recognizing that shared purpose and value that we have in the environment, and making sure that we can celebrate it even in a small way individually. But it would be best if we could get celebration from those in positions of management above, and that would help to solidify that understanding, and really reinforce that positive impact that people are having.
100%. That definitely is so right. Great, great. So, Andy, of course, if our listeners they would like to connect with you and explore more about your work, the resources that you're providing, what should be the easiest way?
Yeah, the easiest way is to connect with us through our website. It's at stormwater.pro. So stormwater.pro. We're also on LinkedIn as well. You can check me out on my personal LinkedIn, Andy Ellsmore. And yeah, it would be great to connect if anybody has questions or would like to share their own personal stories. That would be great.
Superb, superb. I'll make sure to have the links, the details in the show notes for listeners to check this out. And Annie, thank you so much for bringing this up and taking the initiative, because I think this conversation is a reminder that change isn't something abstract. It is personal. Although regulations and science, they give us the structure, the framework, but it's we the people who carry the work forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Great conversation.
And to all the listeners, if you are leading a business, managing a team, or you are simply trying to make a difference in your community, please remember that change doesn't start in policy or science. It starts in people. Thank you to every one of you for tuning into this episode of BizBlend. I'm your host, Sana, and until next time, let's keep blending business with purpose. Thank you.